So hello again, everyone. Charles Banfield here with another Karate Canucks conversation. And this time is my pleasure to be joined by Chief Warrant Officer, Regimental Sergeant Major, SWAT team leader, author, Kwanjan Nim, and Sensei, Bill Wolfe. Mr. Wolfe is a former police officer and a decorated military combat veteran. He began his martial arts journey in 1962 at the age of 8 by enrolling in Judo and Jujitsu lessons offered at the local Army Reserve Armoury in his hometown of Revelstoke, British Columbia. Over the years, he would add boxing, fencing, Hapkido, in which he currently holds an 8th degree black belt, and Defendu, which is a close quarters combat system developed for British commandos in World War II, and something we'll certainly delve into a little more today. Mr. Wolfe started his military career in 1968 and joined the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada Regiment. And throughout his military career, he participated in various deployments across Canada and around the world, including in the Golan Heights, in Cyprus, Germany, among others. Over the years, he would earn the rank of Chief Warrant Officer and the title of Regimental Sergeant Major, and receive the Canadian Forces Decoration, which is awarded to officers and non-commissioned members of the Canadian Forces who have completed 12 years of service with a good record of conduct. Mr. Wolfe is also a retired municipal police officer with the New Westminster Police Department. He's also a police use of force instructor, firearms trainer, and a former emergency response team and special weapons and tactics team leader and instructor. He was also a court certified use of force expert in Canada and the US and the UK. And on top of all this, he has several television credits to his name, including the Devil's Brigade series and the Camp X Secret Agent School series, both of which were aired on History Television. And since 1985, he has been running the International Defendo Federation, which is now called Wolfe's Combatives. And through this organization, he continues to train civilians, security, military, police, and other law enforcement agencies based around the globe. So with all of that, I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Wolfe. Pleasure to finally have you as a guest on this podcast, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, thanks for having me, and that was a very long-winded introduction. Hopefully I can live up to it.
Oh, I hope I can as well. So So why don't we start with usually how I start these conversations is with some basic, general information around, we already got into where you were from. So what prompted you to start your martial arts journey?
Well, basically I can't run very fast, so I figured I'd better take care of it. But actually, my grandfather was the sea captain, and we're Irish by nationality and whatever. And so he spent most of his career in the Far East, places like Bangkok, Shanghai. So he regaled me as a young lad with stories of sailing into Bangkok and watching that, fighting in Bangkok. He had met Fairburn, a guy I'm sure we'll probably talk about, in Shanghai. And, as a little kid, I always had an interest in the military. He says, well, if you're going to join the military, you better learn how to fight. And he gave me a book that Fairburn had written on scientific fighting, and a Boken, which I still have. And I read the book and became enthralled with martial arts. And back then, nobody knew what it was. I didn't know what judo was, didn't know anything. A few years later, I saw a movie with James Cagney, Blood on the Sun. I don't know if you've ever seen it. We're seeing. Has a falling armbar in it, which I was told by the Gracies they had created. Well, that was 1943. Brilliant. So that got me even more interested. And then I found living in Revelstoke, there's an old Japanese gentleman that worked as a conductor on the CPR. He taught judo at the armies, as you mentioned. That got me enthralled. in judo. As soon as I walked in, stepped on the mats, I went, yep, this is for me. And went from there. And it's been, 60 years ever since.
Wow. So I was reading through, I guess, a biography that you had written about, well, I don't know if it's a biography, but it includes a bit of a biography about Colonel Fairburn and a few others like Eric Sykes and Robert Frederick and others. And you told the story about Harold Starren.
Harold Starren.
Starren, sorry, forgive me. Yeah, Starren, and your first experience and exposure to him, and I'm sure that would carry with you for the rest of your career, I guess, up until his passing.
Well, Harold is, he's one of those unsung heroes, if you will. I met Harold in Revelstoke. He was he was British. He'd served in the 42 Royal Marine Commando, sergeant. Later, he was transferred to SOE, Far East. But Harold had studied judo at Budokan in London, and he had a second dan black belt in judo before the war. So, and he was a reserve member of the Royal Marines. So when the war broke out, he was called to duty with the Royal Marines. They formed a commando brigade, and of course, Harold, having a judo background, became the candidate for instructor's course, which he took under Fairburn, before Fairburn went off to teach SOE. Anyway, long story short, Harold fought in Burma with the Royal Marines, SOE. I immigrated to Canada. I met him in Revelstoke. He was a traveling life insurance salesman. So he would come into the judo club when he was in town and teach classes. And if you can imagine, as a young lad, I'm sitting there. Here I got a guy who was a black belt, which we didn't ever, our instructor was a brown belt. So black belt, that was pretty incredible to begin with. The fact that Harold had been in the Royal Marine Commandos was even more enthralling. So it was like a gift. So long story short, when we moved to Vancouver, he was teaching at the YMCA. So I was down there like a dirty shirt and lived there with Harold. Harold mentored me. He's the guy who got me interested in the military, cadets, Seaforth cadets, later the reserves, then into the regular army with the patricias. And Harold was a character. He could, under combat wise, brilliant. He's one of those guys who did it. So when he taught a knife fighting class, he shut up and listened because he used it. Judo, I seen Harold take guys who spent 10 years training in Japan at the Kodokan. They come into the Y, Harold would take them apart. Harold taught me fencing, Western fencing and a little kendo, but Western fencing mostly. He specialized in the saber. We had a captain in the regiment, Captain Best, who was a part of the Canadian Olympic team or had tried out for the Canadian Olympic fencing team. Harold and him did an exhibition with sabers. Afterwards, I said to Captain Best, how good is he? And he said, he's really good. And so, yeah, Harold taught me scuba diving. He taught us all things commando, if you will, as a young lad in the Army. When he passed, if I was smart, I would have filmed him. I would have had more conversations with him, but he probably told me to F off. He was just that kind of guy. Judo-wise, very good. He's the guy who taught me Defendu. He taught the regiment, Seaforth back then. He ran recce platoon. And, in the military, recce is sort of where we kept all the old commando skills. So basically, we got an education from Harold. That carried me forward into the patricias and other things I've done. When I taught ERT, I brought Harold out, and he had some good input, even as an old man. So, old guys you want to get to meet and keep their memories going, if you will. The skill sets that he taught are much of what we teach on the floor behind me.
Right. And he was a senior student, I guess, of Fairburn. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say senior student. He did the under combat instructor's course with the commandos at the commando school in Scotland under Fairburn. And I have no idea, was that a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I do not know. But he was certified to go back to Royal Marine Commando and become an armed combat instructor. So from Fairburn. That was probably his only contact with Fairburn at that time. So a senior student, well, I mean, he survived the war. He fought the Japanese hand to hand in Burma. So I guess that would make him a senior student.
Yeah, maybe that was a mischaracterization by me. I was under the impression that he was one of his instructors or whichever, but maybe I got it.
Well, he was an instructor in the Royal Marine Commando. So he was certified by Fairburn at that time to go teach the Royal Marines. So in that regard, with military and combat, you don't really have this hierarchy like you do in martial arts. You know, this guy's this guy and this guy's that guy. You get certified and then you go teach. You know, like I taught in the military for 40 odd years. So that would make me a senior instructor. Now, what made me a senior instructor? I was a Chief Warrant Officer. I basically tell you what to do and you do it, because I was a Chief Warrant Officer and I taught in combat. So if you were a sergeant instructor, I outranked you. So that's basically how it worked.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to me, it does.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
So obviously, Harold Styron was your primary influence. Who would you say would be other key instructors or influences that you had? Too many to name.
There's a lot over the years, but I mean, there's no one of any famous. I can't throw out famous Japanese instructors. The only one I could throw out, probably you may hear, was Kimura.
Yeah.
Doug Rogers brought him to Vancouver to do a seminar, late 60s, I think 69 maybe it was. And we had the opportunity, the judo clubs in the Lower Mainland got a chance to do this seminar, 2-day weekend seminar with Kimura. And it was an eye-opener, because he was the legend. You know, as they say, no judo before Kimura, no judo after Kimura. Doug Rogers himself was a Canadian legend. He won the silver medal for us in the Olympics. So, and a huge man, by the way. I can remember at the end of the seminar standing next to in line to thank Kimura, and he came along the line, shook everybody's hand, and I was standing next to a guy who was a football player, big lad, and Kimura looked at him and he said, "You play football?" And he said, "Yes, Sensei." He says, "You stick to football." So he looked at me, he said, "More technique."
More technique, yeah.
So that put me on the path to get better at technique. So that was those guys. But a lot of the influences are just guys that you probably never hear who are very good at what they did, whether it be karate, judo, jujitsu. They just loved it. They were passionate about it. Like the Korean guys I trained with, the Song brothers, Jay and Sam Song, were the first guys to bring Hapkido to Canada. I met them in Edmonton when I was stationed there. Both were, Jay was a Korean Ranger, so tough guy, a Rock Ranger. His brother Sam was a captain in the Korean Special Forces. He'd fought in Vietnam with the Koreans, so incredibly tough guy. So their training was very to the point, if you will. So a lot of guys, guys in Germany, I trained with French guys. A lot of, like, as you know, martial arts in France is very strong. So lots of guys.
We were chatting prior to this interview, and the name Pat O'Neill came up.
Yes, Pat.
And he was also a well trained or well skilled judoka as well, if I got that correctly, or
well, O'Neill was a Fairburn protege. I don't know if your viewers probably do or do not know about these guys, but they've lived and served in a place called Shanghai, China in the 20s, 30s, up till World War II started. And they were part of the Shanghai Municipal Police Force, and the Shanghai Municipal Police Force was basically responsible for a 7 to 12 mile area in Shanghai, which was the British protectorate zone. And they were mostly British. Pat was Irish, recruited to serve as constables within some of what the old Hong Kong police used to be. Fairburn trained with Ichimura Sensei, who taught Kano, very famous judokai. O'Neill trained with him. He, by all counts, was a brilliant martial artist, loved martial arts, judo in particular, jiu-jitsu. He earned the 7th dan. He was the highest ranking unarmed combat instructor in World War II, Dan-wise, proficiency-wise. He not only did judo, several forms of Chinese kung fu. He lived and breathed it. The story has it he trained with Kimura as a young black belt in the Kodokan in the 30s. O'Neill had, by all accounts, an excellent reputation at ground fighting the Waze in judo. So, and he, during the war, taught SOE, FBI. Then he was seconded to the 1st Special Service Force, which was the Devil's Brigade, as you mentioned. He was their instructor. I've seen the footage of him teaching. General Fredericks had the presence of mind to film the training he did for the 1st Special Service Force way back in 1942. So they have a pretty good record. I've seen him do roundhouse kicks that would make most MMA fighters stand up in awe. He liked to fight. Irishman, of course, we all like to fight. So he was the man when it comes to armed combat in our lineage, as far as it goes.
Yeah, so he would have been certainly an influencer for you. Not somebody that you would have. Had you ever met the man or?
Unfortunately, no. I trained in Patricia's. Are you okay?
I'm fine. Just drop my pen.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, no. I trained in Patricia's with guys that Captain Larry Story, Sergeant Major Jerry Wainwright. Jerry Crawford, not Wainwright. At Wainwright. Crawford, for example, they were all part of the 1st Special Service Force. They've been trained by O'Neill. And Crawford became the unarmed combat instructor. He ran the last 11-week instructor's course in Wainwright, which was based on the O'Neill model. Mm-hmm. So those are the guys that were how would you say it, influential in that. I mean, they fought in the war. I mean, here's the manual and here's these guys. So in the middle is where you meet with them. And if you listen to them, you learn how to soldier. And the stuff that they taught us was the stuff that would carry you forward in battle. It's the stuff that I've always tried to pass on, whether it be in policing or in the military, because it's proven, if you know what I mean. And they were direct students, if you will. And I don't like to say students. They were trained by O'Neill. In 1947, Canada formed the 1st Canadian SAS company under Guy Artois, and he brought O'Neill in to formulate the unarmed combat training and small arms training for the SAS, Canadian SAS. Story, Crawford, Bob Blackwell, Bob Plant, who were all Regimental Sergeant Majors after that, were all trained by O'Neill. They were the unarmed combat instructors. They formulated what we call Defendo, unarmed combat training for the Canadian Army, which differentiates from Defendu, which is the British system. And anyway, this is our lineage that we talk about. You probably read about, probably bored the crap out of you.
Won't bore the crap out of me for sure. So I'm a sponge for all this kind of stuff. So in the introduction that I provided there, I mentioned that you started, received training in Defendu, mm-hmm. But the system that you have kind of developed, the combative system that I guess it's called Defendo now. So is there a real difference between the two besides the spelling or the intent behind it, or?
Yeah, there is. Defendu was what Fairburn was teaching SOE, OSS. And Fairburn's system is, judo, jujitsu, with some striking put atemi. When you're tasked with teaching like OSS agents or SOE, which are, we'll call them spies, mm-hmm. They were infiltrated in behind the German lines into occupied Europe. Basically, your skills you're teaching them is how to escape and evade. So if they're stopped at a checkpoint, for example, the German would do something to them, they would take them out. They were taught how to assassinate, so sentry removal, stuff like that. And that's a much more clandestine style of fighting. Where O'Neill's system, the Defendo system, as we call it, was the 1st Special Service Force was a commando unit, half Canadian, half American. And the gist of the unit was they were going to be parachuted into Norway and take out the atomic heavy water plants, which was basically a suicide mission. So Frederick's orders to O'Neill was these guys had to be assertively confident in their ability to close with and kill the enemy. So, and what you got in his system is a lot more speed, force, and violence of action. So basically, the enemy pops up, you have to attack him as you're fighting through an objective. So it's not like you're being stopped at a checkpoint, have to escape and evade, or you're going to go out and assassinate this individual. You're actually engaged, you parachuted in, you have to close in to RV point, then go to assault line, take out the objective, and you're going to fight through that objective. So you got, a hand-to-hand combat situation only because you can't shoot the guy. So stuff like that. So his system is far more aggressive in that regard. So there was more. The first level was striking, punching, kicking, biting, scratching. Whereas Fairbairn's system was more, guy put a hand on you, you break his arm with a joint, like a jujitsu, like an arm bar or something like that, along those lines. It was still all dirty fighting, but O'Neill's system was a lot more aggressive, for lack of a better description. Well, you have to basically close with and kill him in a heartbeat. So that was the nature of the training. I mean, the first level training was striking, employed with knives. Like basically, O'Neill's system, you got a guy who's a boxer, put a knife in his hand, and have him just use that knife as he would boxing. So it makes you a pretty effective fighter. So, I mean, if you look at the World War II statistics, the enemy were killed in a hand-to-hand combat situation either because they were able to infiltrate, get behind him, and choke him out. So he died by strangulation, or he was killed at knife point, or blunt force trauma. And that was very rarely a judo chop or a knife hand, like a ridge hand or any of that stuff, because the human body's pretty damn resilient. So for you to beat somebody to death in the middle of a battlefield, you're going to get pretty tired of doing that. So they were taught to arm drag, take the back, take the guy out, choke him out, or top mount, stuff like that. But very quickly employ a fighting knife, hence why they all carry the V42 combat knife, stuff like that. And Fairbairn created his version of the same knife. So, different concept than today, if you follow what I'm saying. Yeah. And if you look at, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm trying to reconcile with, that system or that style of system. You mentioned a boxer, you put a knife in a boxer's hand and have him box. And that's, that's a formidable warrior right there with that weapon. I'm just trying to reconcile with the, and especially given your vast experience and knowledge of different styles of martial arts and combat sports and so on, would it be fair to say that, it takes a bit out of boxing and a bit out of judo or grappling and a bit out of some other striking arts, or was it a completely different system altogether?
Well, compared to Fairbairn's, Fairbairn's system, if you would, was basically a jiu-jitsu based. O'Neill's platform, what he realized, here would be your conundrum. You arrive at Fort Harrison and you're told by the colonel, later General Fredericks, that you have to train 2,500 men. Okay. So, I mean, if I go to a seminar and I've got 60 guys on the floor, it's a daunting task. How do we even start this? So now you got to train 2,500 men to go to war. And not only go to war, they're going to be parachuted into Norway and have to take out Germans. So what he realized, and back then, nobody knew about martial arts. Nobody knew judo, jiu-jitsu from beans, but everybody had done boxing. So there's your platform. Everybody had a bit of high school wrestling maybe, but boxing was more common. So boxing became the core, or the platform, if you will, that you attached all the other skills to. So what O'Neill did is he kept the basic boxing skills, okay, jab, cross, hook, whatever you want, but then, you take your jab, you turn it into eye rake, extending the fingers, taking the guy's eyes, you punch out the throat, you dirtied it up. You took, say, boxing back to where it was before it became Marcus of Queensbury. Then he employed kicking, okay, front kick, instep kick, and side kick. Not so much the round kick, although he could do a round kick. But in combat, you can't really do a lot of turning on your foot like you would a round kick because of the terrain. So he created what we call a commando side kick, which is very low, take out the knee. So when you applied that offensively, defensively, if the German was a boxer, you'd break his knee, stuff like that. But their platform, if you will, was that boxing. And as they progressed through training, they got that skill. They would add in then, okay, guys choking you, how to break the choke, arm drag, platform choke, finger locks, simple joint manipulation would come from that. But they first had to learn the striking skills to close that distance, go across second phase, take out the enemy, stuff like that. So the platform was boxing. That's the biggest difference between the Fairburn and the O'Neill system, if you will, is that concept of that platform.
Okay. And so would you say that your system, which is based on O'Neill's largely, if I understand you correctly, would it be fair to say that boxing is still the template or the basis for it, or have you incorporated other arts and activities that you've accumulated over the years?
Well, basically, our boxing still the platform. You may look at it now because of kickboxing, it looks a little more like that because of the legs and the employment of hands and feet is the first phase. We have what we call a hard target program, which is where the entry level program where people come in. And that's a striking program because basically you can teach a dog to kick and punch if you have time. But to do jujitsu, to do joint manipulation, takes more time. So the second level of training would become that stand-up grappling, judo, jujitsu, wrestling, to ground fighting, and to stuff like that. But the first level is striking hands. So we employ, your basic boxing skills, railed stance, stuff like that. Kicks we've added in like the low roundhouse kick because it's more common today. It's also used on the street more. Muay Thai became popular in the 80s when I was policing. So the bad guys would learn how to do a low round kick to take out your knee. So we had to learn how to stop that kick and then how to stuff like that. So basically we have incorporated that, but our concept is still KISS, keep it simple and savage, or keep it simple, stupid. Because again, if I look at the average civilian come here train with me now, they come 2 nights a week, maybe. How much can you actually teach them in 2 nights a week for an hour and a half per class? Right. So you have to have a very basic platform, and anyone who's trained with me will tell you I'm big on basics. Forget all the fancy nonsense. Basics. You got to get good at basics, and I'm sure it's with what you're training. Basics. Then I can add to it. If you don't have the basics, it's like building on a foundation that's on sand. And so, that's what we're still trying to do, and that's what O'Neill did, and Fairburn to a certain extent. Because remember, their training was operationally tasked. Fairburn's training was to train OSS, SOE agents to parachute behind enemy lines and disrupt German activity to collect intelligence. Exactly. O'Neill's job was to train a commando force to go against the Germans and defeat them in close combat. So different concept, if you will.
So given your, obviously your military and your police experience, what is your take on the functionality of various martial arts systems that you've trained in or that you've been exposed to?
I don't.
Was it a fair question?
It's a complicated question. I'll get death threats, I'm sure. It depends on who the instructor is. Mm-hmm. A lot of styles are just styles. A lot of them, Asian martial arts, are trying to keep a tradition alive, which I believe in. And I spent a lot of time studying Hapkido, learning Hapkido. I've done my pilgrimages to Korea, to the Mecca of Hapkido and all this stuff. And, I trained with the original instructors, Jihan Jay, Kwon-Sik Myung, all these guys are all, I think Jay's still alive, but most of them are dead now. And the guys who run, say Hapkido, I can pick on it because I'm very familiar with, are junior to me in the fact that they started training after I was already a 5th-degree black belt. But now they head up organizations, or they're on the shelf of that organization with some very old Korean who's the figurehead. The training, when I did it originally in the late 60s and 70s, was hard. It was to the point. You had to kick, you had to punch, you had to take a throw, your arm almost got ripped off, and all this stuff. Today, I go into Hapkido school and I look at it and I go, I don't see anything that looks like what I did. I see a lot of backflips. I see what I call theatrical martial arts that would never work on a month of Sundays in the real world. Yet these young men and women think that this bad guy attacks them on the street, you're going to be able to do this nonsense. So I have no problem with that if you say this is what you're doing, it's, but don't tell them it's street applicable self-defense, because it's not. You're giving them false confidence. So, and that's more attention. And each style has to look at that for themselves. I mean, you've got guys, I'm sure in what you do, have had street fights, and how much of that. I mean, when I was a cop, I never seen a Taekwondo black belt win a street fight. Mm-hmm. He got a shit kicked by a street fighter. Why? Because a street fighter doesn't give him a break. There's no, you don't get to bounce around, stuff like that. Judo guy may do a little better, but when the street guy starts throwing punches, he doesn't know how to stop it. So he gets hands on. Yeah, a boxer will take out a karate guy in a lot of cases because he gets in the ring and actually hits things.
And gets hit, yeah.
And gets hit. So this is the reality that people don't want to address. In tradition, you can hide behind tradition, as I say. Like I could, for example, it'd be a lot easier for me to turn this school behind me into a Hapkido school, because I don't have to meet the rubber on the road. I can talk about philosophy. I could give you secret pressure points and all this other stuff. And I still do Hapkido seminars, but they're calling me into the seminar to, okay, here's the why. How do you make your Hapkido work on the street? And okay, we're going to get rid of 97% of what you're learning because it's a waste of time. Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah. So why do you think that is, though? Like, I have a karate background, wrestling background. I've done some kickboxing and some other things, and I don't want to impugn anybody or any system or style or anything like that, but it does seem to be that there's a different, when you're in the dojo, this is what will make you a badass, but on the street, it's not, right? And is it, I've been trying to figure this out for myself. Is it because we're offered too many tools in the training hall and expected to use them all with a similar level of proficiency versus getting really good at a shorter selection of tools that are actually really effective?
I think it's even simpler than that. Is you're not being trained to fight on the street. You're not meeting. In other words, your training is not tactically correct to what you're going to meet on the street. And if you're a diligent instructor, when I retired, from my career, so from military policing, back in the military and retiring again after, 40 odd years of that nonsense, I opened a Hapkido school. And I taught Hapkido, as traditionally as I could with my conscience. And what I was doing in the afternoons is I was running classes for police officers, corrections officers, because they needed self-defense training. And I did a seminar on a weekend for these guys and gals. And my students, my Hapkido students, watched it. They went, we want to learn this. So what I did is one night a week, we did what we call Defendo, street stuff. And before long, it was 2 nights, 3 nights, because it made sense. It was more realistic. Nobody wanted to do spinning kicks, jumping, antatari, bokatagi, and all this other stuff. And, and then we got more older guys and older women coming to train because they didn't have to do the nonsense. And what my theory has always been, here's the street. This is the tactics that are going to be employed against you. If you do not know how to stop that, and your training is not teaching you how to meet that, you can learn all the fancy stuff. You can learn all this other stuff. Unless you're a really tough guy or gal, the bad guy's going to defeat you. Either you're going to get ambushed on the street, pounded and grounded, or you're going to get this guy in your face talking you to death, then he's going to launch, because they know how to use their voice better than you do. They know how to intimidate. And when you get intimidated, you implode. You don't use your skills. Yeah. So in most martial arts, there's no mind-body connection to use it, if you will, to pull the trigger if you have to. I mean, you're self-doubt. And the training is not preparing you for all that application. You get into trouble. And, I don't know. I would personally, it'd be nice to see, keep tradition alive. It's important in arts. But the first phase of training should be, in my opinion, up to black belt, street level self-defense or self-defense training. That, you know, if your tag in your school says I teach karate, self-defense, and fitness, then you better underline the self-defense part and you better underline the fitness part. I'm an old man. I have guys coming here who tell me, they bring these great resumes. They get gassed after the first bag drill.
Yeah.
They have no basic skills. So why are you bragging to me, lad? You know?
Yeah.
So I think if you're a diligent instructor, that's where you should go. And there are tons of guys and gals out there do that. That's, you know, I guess my bread and butter in retirement. The guys bring me into their dojo and say, this is Mr. Wolfe. He's going to take this and show us how to do it. Because, you know, basically a kick is a kick, a punch is a punch. But how does the bad guy set you up? And, you know, you can transcend your training to meet that if you understand the tactics involved.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, certainly. Yeah. So then for somebody then who is, you know, they opened a dojo or dojang or whichever, but they don't have, like, say they're highly ranked in their art, their style, but they haven't had much, if any, experience on the street, you know, tactical experience, as you called it. What would you recommend for an instructor like that, aside from hiring yourself to come in and give a seminar?
You know, start watching security footage. There's tons of it out there. So seeing how people are set up, seeing how the attacks in place. Like one of the common taglines I hear, all street fights end up on the ground. I'm sure you've heard that. Never heard it.
I've heard it. I just know it's not true. That's a Gracie marketing ploy. Yeah.
Better you saying that than me. Okay. That is actually an LAPD police stat that said originally 87% of all police arrests end up on the ground. The Gracies kind of borrowed it.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love to have their business manager, but that's not true. If you're on the street, you're losing. If you're on the ground, you're going to be losing because the crowd's not neutral and you're going to get the boots laid to you. It's not correct that the guy's going to top mount you. He's going to lay the boots to you. So if you don't know how to stop the boots being laid to you, forget the top mount. The most common ground fighting technique from a standing to the ground is a side headlock. Guy grabs you in a side head, bulldogs you to the ground. That's the most common, not a top mount, not the guard. So, man, it ain't a sport. This scar on my nose is from getting it bitten off in a ground fighting situation. So that doesn't happen in BJJ, does it? So, unless the guy's an idiot. It's a sport. Good sport. Gotta love it. But so again, there's elements of everything that you do that you've done in your training, and you look at the tactics that's employed on the street, watch those video footages, see how people are being set up, see what's taking place, and then address your initial response. We call it starter response training to deal with that. An ambush is an ambush. Once you're ambushed, you know you're in shit.
Mm-hmm.
But when the guy gets in your face, starts talking to you, you know, the talker we call it. He's setting you up. Are you checking your 6 o'clock? Because where is his friends going? Because nobody's brave by themselves today. I'm the last superhero. Okay? Nobody's brave by themselves. So where are they coming from? They're going to blindside you. Bullies are very good at using their voice to intimidate. So if you don't have the indomitable fighting spirit built within you, you're going to be succumbed to that. And so these are the things that you need to build into your training. And like, you know, you have to have fighting tactics or fighting skills. You need fitness as a component, and you need tactics. But you also have to component, which is the mind body. How is the mind and body going to function under that stress load? And then finally, you have that spirit that I will never give up. I will survive no matter what spirit. That has to be part of your training. And you can't get that level of training and that level internal commitment without sweat equity, without discipline. You know, and you know, I'm sure your karate, your training is discipline and it's a lot of sweat equity. But how is it directed? Are you talking about these secret Japanese this or that samurai shit? I got news for you. The samurai don't exist anymore. So, you know, you can read Bushido till you bleed It's not going to help you in a street fight. Okay. So how are the bad guys going to use what they know, which they've learned from the School of Hard Knocks, against you and your students? That's what you have to prepare for. And that takes a lot of time on 2 hours. What's your class? 1 hour a night? 2 times a week, maybe?
Yeah, it depends. Well, when the dojo was open, it was hour and a half, typically 3-4 times a night. Yeah, or 3-4 times a week. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So if you get everybody showing up on a regular basis, if you get them 3 days a week, an hour and a half, that's pretty good. On average, people come once a week, maybe, unless they're really dedicated. Senior students tend to come more. So how long is it going to take you to prepare them to meet that challenge? Now, I've known young people going all the way up to their black belt. And as soon as that street guy gets in their face, they've not been prepared to meet that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yes, and you can call me, I'll help you. But I'm not the only guy. There's lots of good guys out there. I mean, I'm sure within your organization, there's lots of guys who got the experience and they want to do it and they would like to do it, but there's some hierarchy that says you can't do it. And, it's a tradition, and people hide behind tradition because they're afraid to, we'll call it experiment. I mean, all fighting came from the same mother. We just have different fathers. I think it's a wise man that said, and it gets polluted. Violence is violence. It's not changed. Look at Ukraine right now. What's changed? Nothing. So violence is violence.
Yeah.
So it's how you prepare your people to meet that violence. Okay. That's been my challenge to a police, military, and I'll call it martial arts career. If we can do that, how to prepare people, because I'm not interested in maintaining fluff anymore than military fluff, because there's a lot of military stuff that's pure. As I said to you before, you can't fix stupid.
So back to the street applications and so on too. So it's one thing if you are the victim, say, of a predatory attack of some sort, right? Which I think most of these training programs or systems or whichever, they're designed to address that, the actual fighting, the striking, the grappling, the, plucking of eyes, that kind of stuff. What about the legal ramifications? So in terms of, it's one thing if you are clearly the victim, somebody comes up behind you and bashes you and tries to accost you in some way. But what if it's a dueling situation? Does that get addressed, where somebody's like gets in your face and you're like, you decide to oblige them and then off you go, right?
I hear what you're saying. I mean, we talk about legal applied levels of force. And when I teach courses and training, we talk about legal applied levels of force. I mean, in theory, you're a good person. I mean, I will walk away from a fight because why not? I don't have anything to prove. But if you deny my lawful right to walk away, it then becomes the worst day of your life. Now, how much force am I going to need to use? You dictate that, not me, because I just offered to walk away. It's like when I used to arrest people, I'd say, sir, madam, what do I have to do to get you to comply to this arrest? And basically they did that, or the verbal altercation, I'd punch them in the head and put them under arrest because they've indicated they're not going to come peaceful. Okay. So I just, in this, everybody today has got a cell phone camera. And they're not calling the police to get you help or an ambulance, they're filming you. Mm-hmm. So every word you use can be used against you. So yes, you have to have a concept of applied levels of force. The decision is you have to be able to make that decision for yourself in the stress of that combative situation. No one can do it for you. So if your emotions are being hijacked by the situation, in other words, you can't stay in control. This is where you got to become a samurai, where you breathe, you become one. You use your breathing and you stay focused and you don't let all the distractions, the verbal diarrhea, take you away off your game plan. But if he can emotionally hijack you, you're going to make mistakes. And you've seen this with police officers, especially in the United States, where they go excessive. Why are they doing that? Because they're panicking. Their training has not taught them to maintain that level of assertive confidence within themselves where they can't be hijacked emotionally. Your training has to do the same. And that's samurai shit, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You should shake your head, yes. So, but again, how do you apply that in modern terms? How do you take the psychology of violence and what we know about science and the neurons in the brain and all this stuff and make that apply in your class?
Mhm.
Because if you can't keep the jockey on the horse and you panic, you're either going to go into flight, which means you're not going to fight because maybe you're afraid of hurting the guy, or you're going to go excessive because you don't want to get hurt and your only response is that.
Mhm.
So how do you keep yourself, how do you walk away? Some guys can't walk away because, well, it looks bad. Tough shit, walk away.
Mhm.
But again, if that's denied you, then you have to make a command decision on what level of force you're going to apply to that situation. And a lot of people can't do it. A lot of victims of crime, including martial arts guys who become victims of violent assault, can't give themselves permission to unload, because it's not like going into like I used to fight in tournaments. You go into your locker room, the other guy being the other side of the locker room, and you get all sweaty. You work up, you're practicing all your skills, you get all good. Then you got that walk to the ring, you get all hyped up, then you get in the ring, and away you go. We've had time to prepare. On the street, that doesn't exist. It's all said and boom, you're up shit creek in a heartbeat. So emotionally hijacked. And the same goes for policing. I mean, I get my radio call, can you copy a call? Violence call, whatever. From the moment you get that call, it starts doing this. So now you're not in the yellow state anymore, you're in that red state. Well, you can't maintain a red state for very long, so you got to bring yourself down psychologically. So now you start going tactically in your brain, you start thinking about things you have to do, and you try to keep the jockey on the horse. So when you do get to the call, you're not ramped. You're functioning at the appropriate level and stuff. That's training. And nobody comes to me to train with me who knows this shit. You didn't come out of mom saying, I know how to fight. You don't. So it trains you. So a lot of the problem I have with the training is it's just not making any sense to the violence that I know, to what I've, and as a cop, for example, I attended the scene after they beat the shit out of you. Then I had to go arrest this idiot. So, and a lot of the stuff they use against you, I taught them, because when they come in, I slip them, I put them in a chokehold and put them to sleep, which you're not allowed to do anymore. And they use it against you. And why do I use the chokehold? Because back in my day, we didn't have tasers, we didn't have pepper spray. We had 2 fists and 2 feet, and you had to know how to use it. So when you took the guy, you put him up to sleep, you wake him up, cuff him, and away you go. So they would use it against you. So the tactics, street guys are better at learning tactics than, say, maybe your student is, because they're not employed on the street causing trouble. You know what I mean? And, there's very few trained martial artists, MMA guys or Brazilian guys, that go out and cause trouble because they're too busy training, having fun, doing what they love. It's the guy who's done the few classes, who thinks, who's the, we'll call him the asshole for lack of a better description, goes out and applies it. And I had that experience as a cop. I mean, you have the guy who was the boxer, who done a little, he's part of the Queensboro Boxing Club. He get liquored up and he went outbox me. Well, I know a little bit about boxing, but I also know how to break your leg. Boxer doesn't know how to stop that kick. We'd had SCFU wrestling team going out on the boys' night, get all liquored up. You have to arrest them. You can't arrest me. Well, next thing they try to leg pick you. Well, I know how to stop that. So, you had the Muay Thai guy, 2.5 days of Muay Thai. What's the first thing he's do? He's going to round kick your leg, get your kneecap off. Well, I know how to stop that. So, but they do it against you and you don't know how to do it. So boom. So, and they're learning what is popular. It's like Arnis, Filipino knife fighting and all that stuff. I've never had anybody attack me with a knife in that manner. Sorry. So why would I bother teaching you Filipino knife fighting when that doesn't work it doesn't exist in the real world? Unless I meet a Filipino guy and you got a knife. Then 90% of the Filipinos don't know how to use a knife because they don't do Filipino knife fighting. They don't have time. They're too busy trying to earn a living to do martial arts. So the bad guys, the nut bars, pick it up. And then, the guys that always bothered me were the guys that learned how to use an edged weapon in prison, because it was dark and dirty, much like I would teach a soldier to use a knife. That's what you have to deal with. Now, are you training? Do you do knife training in your class? Tanto? And do you Tanto Jitsu?
From time to time, it gets incorporated into. So I'm not a senior instructor by any stretch. So but it gets incorporated into some of the Goshin Jitsu things that we do. So we have this Nagino sequence that we do is 15 throws, and it's against a punch, but could also be against a knife. So it's kind of incorporated that way. There isn't a class on knife fighting. There isn't at least in the curriculum that I've been exposed to so far.
That's probably a good thing, because I mean, a lot of and I hate to break anybody's bone, but a lot of knife training I've seen taught in martial arts is just a waste of time. Nobody uses it that way. I still teach a cross block and two-hand blocking against knife, and I'll have our East guy say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that." Well, you know what, dude? I've had guys try to stab me, and it works. And it works really well. And it worked really well against you, because you don't know what the shit I'm going to do against you.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's, again, comes back to what you asked about, how do you prepare for the street? There's a big difference how things are used, whether it be an impact weapon, an edged weapon on the street, than in the dojo. And you have to train your people to recognize those tells of how it will be deployed. Hands deliver weapons. You lose concept of the guy's hands in a street fight, watch out. If you start and you gap, you give me the opportunity to draw my knife or to pick up the beer block.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a boxing match. You throw a couple rounds, move around, pop, pop, pop. On a street fight, you don't have that luxury. When you say go in your head, it's go. And the average street fight lasts 3 minutes. That's like putting it in context. In the first 15 seconds, that's like running 2 marathons back to back at a 6-minute mile. That's how much energy you're going to expend. And why? Because of fear. Mm-hmm. Fear of serious, grievous bodily harm or death. You don't get that in a tournament. You don't get it in the dojo. So how do you simulate it? And how do you function at that stress load? Now, you wonder why cops have a hard time arresting people, and why their performance doesn't look all spiffy spaffy, because stress load. So are you training for that stress load?
That's the question, isn't it? Because if you don't know, like if the instructor doesn't know what it's like to be in that situation, how do they impart that onto their students and so on?
And that's just due diligence, homework, understanding on the part of who's teaching. If you take on the role of an instructor, whether it be whatever style, it's your job. If you have self-defense in your title somewhere, it's your job to make sure that you're fulfilling that commitment. Because if they're paying you, even if it's 10 cents, that makes you a professional. Be damn good at what you do. Don't take the money on false pretense.
So stress testing obviously is key for any kind of effective functional training in that regard.
If you watch the Devil's Brigade show, the part of the sequences we're doing a jungling, live fire jungling, tapping the guys on the helmet, telling them to change the magazines. You're under fire, So you're adding stress in. Well, these are trained soldiers. Some of the guys are Green Berets. And I put in a spread, and they're dropping their magazine on the ground because they can't function under the stress load. And the test, the same as we did the unarmed combat. Devil's Brigade, we did the unarmed combat training. All those soldiers, Rangers, Green Berets, and Canadians, had no effective unarmed combat training. So we came into it teaching this stuff. They were like, holy shit. Now, if you look at the average American soldier, and they have the most defined unarmed combat, modern army combatives, the average American soldier gets 1.5 hours unarmed combat training per month, maybe. So how do you create any efficiency? The Canadians, even less some cases. If you've got a commanding officer who likes unarmed combat or a company commander, you get training. If they don't, you get no training. So all of a sudden now, the Russian pops up in front of you, because that's where we're going. And he's Spetsnaz, or he's Sistema trained. Who's going to win? We are, because the Russians are fucking shit trained. You can see that right now in Africa. It's not working for them, So, stuff like that. But we need to train to the threat, and that's been my experience. I mean, I grew up, when I came down from the north to BC to Vancouver, we moved to an area called Strathcona, which is Maine and Hastings, if you've ever been to Vancouver. Maine and Hastings is like zombie land. It's drug central now. When I was a kid, it was gang central. And my first fights were, gang, I wasn't part of a gang, but it was just guys would pick on you and switchblades, and, we joked about joining the Army. How I wound up in the young soldiers and the Seaforth. I was in the cadets. The judge said to me, Mr. Wolfe, you have a choice. Would you like to go to reform school or would you like to join the Army? So I chose Army. So I got in the, as a young lad into the reserve Seaforth, and guys like Harold and that were kind of saying, smarten the fuck up. Mm-hmm. So, you learn from that. And then you go on and, through military service, police service, you start to see what the real world's like when it comes to violence. Not the make-believe world, not Hollywood, because that's another one. Nobody's John Wick. Nobody's Jason Bourne and all this nonsense. But people come to me and say, can you teach me to do that? Sure, I can. I'll take you on the match and I'll show you to be John Wick. And we're going to film it because that's the only time it's going to work for you. You actually think Keanu Reeves can actually do that shit? How many takes do you think it took him to do it? And if you watch the fight scenes, it's the same fight scenes shot from different angles. So he only has to learn one sequence.
Yeah.
Guess what? No two attacks are ever alike.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. So, sadly, I've been shot, stabbed, and blown up. And it don't work so good for you after you had that shit happen. You got to have a little of this and a lot of this to get your ass out of that, extract yourself, if you will. And you see it with policemen today. Training solves the issue, but we're afraid to put the time into training, serious training, hard training. And I guess, I scare people with what we do sometimes because we do take it to that level. Because if you're coming to me for a specific course and I say, this is what this course is about, expect to get it. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's just not me. There's good guys out there all over the place within organization training. We just have to tweak certain things to make it more effective. I think one of the, I've always said martial arts has done a really bad job marketing itself. Like you got way more people doing yoga. And you can namaste all day. I don't know what good it does you. Where I live in Penticton here, they have a violence, stranger on stranger violence has gone up 37% in 2 months. And the reason for that is drugs. We have a big drug problem out here. I'm sure you do in your neck of the woods. So that has gone up. And my wife works at the hospital, and one of their colleagues was attacked. And instead of saying, well, we got to do something about it, they went, oh, we just have to accept it. Now that's how it is. Now, that's very Canadian, complacency. Mm-hmm. So in martial arts, we've, in my opinion, after 60 years, we've become very complacent in how we approach it. In the fact that, if, like I said, if you're going to teach self-defense, make sure you're teaching self-defense. If you're teaching, like I have friends of mine, Hapkido friends, very good, and they think they're samurais, and I love them. But they can't make their Aikido work on the street, nor would they even consider that, because they're following Yoshida Sensei. Brilliant, but they think they're samurai, and that's good. So how do you get around it? I don't know. I've been trying. I just do what I do. I'll piss a lot of people off because they don't want to hear the answers. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of people contacting you saying, well, that guy's full of shit. And, I may be, but we're not going to lose on the street. And, like I told you before, we in Canada, we have the best trained army in the world. And I'm very proud of that because I spent a lot of years in it. And as Regimental Sergeant Major, I had the best soldiers serving under me you possibly have. At the height of my career, we had the best trained, but the worst equipped. It's gotten better. We have good training. We have good equipment. We lack unarmed combat training properly because we try to copy the American programs. The American modern combat program has failed in combat. In Iraq and Afghanistan, they've been ordered to make modifications. If they do, it brings it back to the Canadian program, basically what I'm trying to maintain through our teaching. So we need to take credit for that. We've had 100 years of close combat experience in the Canadian military from World War I to the present day. If you talk to any American Special Forces guys who would be Navy SEALs, and I get to do that, luckily, they think highly of our boys. JTF, CSOR, highly, highly respected soldiers. I will go to a ranger battalion and do stuff, and I'll tell the staff sergeant, ranger staff sergeant, you'll make a good private in my regiment, and I'm a patrician. The ranger staff sergeant makes a good private in the Canadian Army, in the patricians. Maybe not the RCR, but in the patricians, he makes a good. The RCRs, I know, I'll hear from you. Okay, so we're very good. So this level of combat training that we have is what we should be proud of. And as I said to you on my press conference, the reason I really got Defendo, International Defender, was to maintain that tradition, that history, because the Army wasn't going to maintain it anymore, sadly, because, we drive tanks now. It's not like World War II. I mean, when I was in the young lad in the Army, we had 120 rounds of combat ammunition. That doesn't last very long in a firefight, by the way. So you have a knife. Eventually, Geneva Convention said you can't carry a fighting knife. It's against the rules. Well, tell that to the enemy. Stuff like that. So we whittle away till eventually we don't do it anymore. So, but the young lads and gals that train with us here are pretty schooled.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with a gentleman named Tim Larkin. He's kind of in your line of work and in the U.S. and so on. But I don't know much about him except that I enjoy he's got a podcast. He brings people on, and to the point you just made about, well, we have tanks now. We don't need to worry about hand-to-hand stuff so much. He had on somebody from the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, and it wasn't all about Krav Maga and whichever else, but it was about the importance of, and it was kind of a surprising conversation. Like even Larkin, I think he's done SEAL training. He never became a SEAL, I think, because he got injured. But it was kind of an eye-opening thing for a lot of people who were listening in, because it seems surprising that a lot of militaries don't put a high level of value on hand-to-hand combat training, but the Israelis do, and to have this person come on, and I'm sure I'm butchering it with my paraphrasing and so on, but it was like the point of the interview was that there is a value still in having hand-to-hand combat training in a modern military.
Yeah,
and
to give it context, what you're saying, and I won't tell you the unit, but I was at an American thing, and there was a commanding officer and his 2IC, the second in command of the battalion, and the commanding officer was keen on armed combat training, and his 2IC wasn't, because he'd done so much. Yeah, it's all bullshit, and a lot of it is. A lot of it is because the people teaching it don't know how to teach it. So right. It is, and it becomes a waste of training time, because training time is valuable. So anyway, he said to me, well, one night, bullshit. He says, well, what would you do if someone pulled a knife on you? He said, I just shoot him. So he's sitting in a chair like you are. So I pulled my folder out of my knife, stuck it to his throat, and he fell back out of the chair and just scrambled. So shoot him. He doesn't know the shit. Go blind. The SEAL's laughing his ass off. And I said, how long have you been in the military, sir? I've been in 18 years. I says, well, you're 18 years veteran. You've been deployed X number of times, and you don't know what to do. When I pull this knife on you, what do you expect your 19-year-old soldier to know? So, and what impressed me, and I said this to you earlier, was when I read General Frederick's first Special Service Force commanding officer, he told O'Neill, I want my men to be assertively confident in their ability to close the enemy. And he recognized that hand-to-hand combat training was going to give them that level of assertive confidence. And that's true. I mean, as police officers, I train police officers, I don't see confidence in them because their training is not preparing them at that level. And knowing how to fight is that confidence. If you go into a violent situation and you don't know how to defend yourself, firstly, forget arrest somebody. You don't know how to defend yourself. How the hell are you going to do it? Mm-hmm. Now, of course, you could pull your taser. Well, if that doesn't work, and if it's raining and it's windy, it don't work. Your pepper spray don't work either because it's being blowing rain. You're in a confined space, you juice everybody up. How do you arrest the dude? So the gimmicks, the toys, so when you train whether it be cops, soldiers, or your students, up to a level, and they have that assertive confidence in themselves, they don't tend to make the mistakes. They tend to function better under high levels of stress. And that was the whole concept of training. And it's no different than the samurai days or whatever days you want to go, the Knights of the Round Table. The training gave you the confidence to close with the enemy and know you could at least put up a good fight. And with more experience, got better. It's like a good ring fighter he would do better against the street because he's got at least some experience of exchanging blows, getting hit, and he knows his capabilities. If your student's done, quasi sparring or point sparring or whatever, it's kind of like what the question mark is: what was the guy's really coming at me, hard and fast, dirty? I had years ago when I was at the police academy at George Dillman. You know who George Dillman is?
Mm-hmm.
He came by. Doug Fernals, who's an associate of mine, brought him to do a seminar on pressure point control tactics. And I had to take the course in another story. And Dillman's doing this stuff. And I don't know how he has it, but he has always this entourage that follow around of his. And so he's practicing, he's showing his techniques on his students. He says, well, try it on me. Doesn't work. Try it on this guy. Doesn't work. I says, well, Mr. Dillman, I'll tell you what. I've got duty tonight. Why don't you come around on a ride along and show me how this is going to work against these violent individuals? He politely refused. Yeah. It's nonsense. I took the course, and it's a waste of training time. And it became mandated. You had to teach it. Well, pressure points work less than 30% of the time in a training environment. They don't work at all in the street, especially when you apply alcohol and rage to the equation.
Yeah.
So, and you wonder why people don't give a lot of credit in policing military circles to what we do, because we're teaching nonsense. And if you looked at a Fairburn or O'Neill or any of these old guys, they had experience. Like Shanghai Municipal Police Force had more gun battles. I mean, I've been in shots fired. But, when they say Fairburn was in 1,000, he was in 1,000 of them and survived them. You kind of start, you get the bullshit. It can be mounted. Eventually, it bites you in the ass. And that's what we're seeing now. American police training, biting fast. The RCMP just went through a big ministerial review, and there's still another one going on for what happened in the Maritimes. And basically, always coming back, all the training is failing the police officer at the operational level. Why? Because we're not taking the training commitments seriously. We're not looking at how to correct these problems and going to it. When I got into the academy, I came out of the military, retired, decided to become a cop because uniform's a uniform, right? Mm-hmm. And Larry Young, God rest his soul, he was killed on an ERT operation, was the instructor. Larry was a rugby player, tough guy, but he had a yellow belt in karate, so he was the instructor. And I was the second oldest guy in the class. So he said, "You, Wolf, get up, kick me in the head," because he was going to teach how to stop a kick. I said, "You sure you want me to kick you in the head?" He goes, "Yeah." So I kicked him in the head, knocked him out. So, he wasn't out very long. Go away, get him up. He says, "You son of a bitch." I says, "Well, you didn't read the resume, did you?" And the reason he picked on me because I was the old guy, because he figured I couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So to Larry's credit, he said, "You're going to teach this class." So I'm the rookie teaching the rookies, if you will, because I recognize that. But that's how it was back then. It's still that way. I mean, there's too many cops, for example, teaching self-defense who've had a 5-day course. Now, I don't know about you. How much can you really learn in 5 days if you have no background? Now guys come to me, do instructor's course, it's 2 weeks, and they have to have at least a black belt in something or an equivalent. Mm-hmm. And I'm shocked at how many show up who couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. But their resume, my God, you must be a god of war. It's like you just gave mine off. Everyone's going, this guy must be a god of war. I'm an old man. Mm-hmm. God of war is not, you're only as good as your last fight. And the last fight, I had my nose bitten off. So, it's a very realistic fight where I'm just shit at it.
So in your now, 6+ decades of martial arts experience and training and so on, seen and done obviously quite a lot. Is there a favorite or most important concept that you kind of can distill your training or your philosophy of the martial arts down into?
Yes. Keep it simple.
And savage.
Or keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. I mean, you know, people find it hard for me to take stuff seriously, but you have to be very good at basics. And if you got like the core tape and that's basic boxing, basic kickboxing, lack of a better description, basic grappling. And there's like, 20 some odd years ago, when I started showing people how to do an arm drag, people went, what is that? And nobody knew. It's an arm drag. It's Greco-Roman wrestling, dummy. It's been around since Christ was a corporal. But, it was like this secret maneuver and stuff like this. And, you know, like ground fighting, when the Brazilians brought it up, it was, it's judo. We did it in judo. It's been around since ever.
Yeah.
So, they specialize in it. Good on them. So keep it simple and savage. I mean, you have to get those basic skills and you have to be able to employ them. You know, and it's, you know, like I'll spar with my wife, and my wife's 30 some odd years younger than me. Actually 35 years younger than me. So, and she's got a left hook like from hell. It's like a Mack truck will knock you right out of your shoes. I mean, guys, they look at this hot little blonde and go, till she puts the gloves on them and they go, holy shit. And she's a poster child for basics. She can hit with 70% of her body weight. She weighs 130 pounds, 70% of her body weight. So every kick, punch, bite, she can grapple. She worked, we were in England, British judo team, great bunch of guys, and they were trying to show her some judo. Of course, she does what I teach her. We can't do that in judo. Can't do that in judo because it's dirty fight. They tried to throw her, which her appropriate reception so good, she'd land on her feet, or they couldn't do it. Then she'd take them. So anomaly, but hit basics. She got so good at it. And if I try to show something, I'll stick with this. She'll spend 3 hours whacking a bag and at full tilt because conditioning, all these things that we try to get people to do. So basics. So keep it simple and savage and stick with that. Because you can take, like, for example, boxing, and you can do a knife hand off a boxing stance. You can do an eye rake. You can do an elbow. It's a railed stance. It's more applicable on the street because you don't have a trained environment. You have an uneven environment. You have wet grass, bar, whatever, blood. So your footwork is better. I defy you to find anybody who can hit harder than a boxer and move as quick or as agile as a boxer under combative conditions. We have a concept called fish fighting in a small house. I mean, you have to think, what's the size of your living room? That's where you're going to get someone to intrude your house. That's where you're going to fight. So fighting in a small house. How big is the restaurant area you might get into a fight? So you have to learn to fight within that constrictive environment. So all these things, keep it simple and savage, because you don't have time to, even after all the years that I've done, I still hone basics. I mean, I can go on the floor and show you nonsense from Hapkido or Jiu-Jitsu that you go, wow. And I do it. I go, it's just, people go, whoa. It's like impressive. Yeah, but it's never going to work on the street, dude. And it's going to take me a month to teach you to do that one technique.
Yeah.
Or I could be teaching you this other stuff. So those are the things that, kiss.
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking before about Hachi, Pat McCarthy, and one of the things that he likes to say, or I guess one of the ways he defends himself against detractors is because, he has gotten a lot of flack over the years for making up his own style. And his response to that is always, I'm not making it up. This is physics. This is, you can go to Egypt and you can see these, carvings on tomb walls and so on that depict exactly like wrestling and, other types of grappling and weapons and like it's a tapestry of different training techniques and so on. And they're 4,500, at least 4,500 years old, right? So it's a matter, it's how it's all repackaged and whatever else. But
yeah, no, he's right. I mean, I can take you to Gothenburg in Sweden, but Gutenberg, as they say in Sweden, right? Because I taught there for a bunch of years. And there's a statue downtown. It's in the statue is a knife fight. And what you see, the guy has got the guy's arm in the technique that I teach. And it's like basically an armed, but on the edge of the statue, it shows how the fight developed fight over barmaid, by the way. And the statue was erected in 1728. So here's exactly what we just taught in the seminar in a statue that was erected in 1728. So like I said before, violence does not change. No. Fighting does not change. There's only so many ways you can do shit. But what we have today is people creating a lot of nonsense because it sells better. You understand? I mean, imagine if I could say to you, I have this pill. It's the Defendo pill. It will make you an elite warrior. Just take it.
Yeah, the red pill.
Exactly. How many think people would want to buy that pill? Because they don't have to do any sweat equity. I've had people come from other systems or other Defendo groups, if you will, to courses, and they're shocked. Because first off, in the first 10 minutes, they're gassed. We don't train like this. We don't hit things. We don't do this. So what the hell do you do? And you have a conversation, and it's just nonsense. But how do you stop someone throwing a punch? We don't. But nobody in the street throws a punch. So they create an environment of training that makes no sense, and people buy it. So, it's like what Pat's saying is you look at throughout history, and, I look at military history and stuff and military fighting history. The real stuff is the real stuff. It never changes. It's when we get into peacetime applications where we can deviate because we can play with it. Mm-hmm. Morihei Yeshiba, we pick on Aikido. If you look at Morihei Yeshiba as a young man in the 30s in some of the demonstrations, you can actually see him breaking arms. And where did that go when he got into teaching Aikido, when he created Aikido? Because my opinion is his training was too hard, too violent. People were getting hurt.
Yeah.
So he created this, and maybe he had an epiphany, God, or whatever. So he created a much softer, more, I'll call it sellable way. I mean, I can do that. People say you need Defendo light bill. And I said, well, I don't know how to do that yet. Maybe when I get another, when I hit 80, I'll Defendo light it. But, Harold, we talked about Harold. Not the last time I saw Harold, but the last time a fond memory of Harold is when I was policing in the West, I was clearing a coffee break, and I got a fight call, and the address is like just up the block, around the corner. And it's like I'm like 3.5 minutes away from him, so I hop on my car, I go around the corner. Harold's standing there. There's 3 guys on the ground, and one's got a broken leg. Now his throat's all swollen up. The other guy's arms all messed up. This woman comes running out of a fish and chip shop and says, "I've never seen anything like it, Constable." He says, "What do you mean?" Now, 1 minute, these 3 guys are on this old man, and next thing they're on the ground. So I look at Harold, and he's wearing a hat, like a proper bowler hat, London trench coat, which he always wore. He said, "William, it comes back to you." And these 3 guys are trying to rob him because he has his briefcase. And he's still selling, he was 80 something, he's still selling life insurance. He says, "It comes back to you." And heartbeat. And he couldn't tell you what he did. He just did. Mm. So, I would love to be able to do that at that age and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's where we should be going with our training. And, and that doesn't change. That confrontation the Harold experienced at that time hasn't changed time immemorial. So, if you see on the caveman's wall, that still exists today because humans don't change.
So you talked about Yeshiva maybe having an epiphany or whichever else. One of the questions I like to ask is, if you have a most prominent eureka moment, as I like to call them, where suddenly the light went off or went on, I should say, and things kind of suddenly made sense, or something that changed your approach to doing, the martial arts that you're doing, or how you're teaching it, or whichever like that. Do you have any prominent ones that kind of come to mind?
A bunch. I mean, to take me to this really weird position I am. I think when I got in the Army, the training we did in the Army was all cowboys and Indians, for lack of a better word, when we were tactics and stuff, playing, shooting guns, live fire, and all that stuff, etc. When I got deployed to the Middle East in 73, after the 73 war, I was in Port Suez, and the Egyptian Third Army is surrounded by the Israelis. And all of a sudden now I'm sitting in the Bear Hotel, which is downtown in the middle of Suez, and I got tracer rounds going this way, tracer rounds going this way. I got tanks firing down, and I got an Israeli M113 armored personnel carrier coming up the street, hit by an RPG, burning tanks, bodies. I'm going, fuck, this is real. And I got 20 rounds of ammunition and FN rifle that I'm not allowed to shoot. And I'm going, so we're hunkered down. Luckily, there was some scotch. I never drank scotch since, but like this, and the bullets going by, and I'm going, holy shit. So it took me in my mindset, okay, when I go back, this is real. And I was stationed in Germany at the time with 4 Brigade, 3 Canadian Mech Commando. And we had M113s, like this Israeli thing. And I had a real hard time going inside it after seeing this thing hit by an RPG. So that was an epiphany. So, policing was an epiphany when it was street violence, because I was a street fighter before I joined the military. That's why I got there. But when you see violence directed towards people and you're there basically picking up the pieces, and why wouldn't you fight back? And a lot of people say to me, because I was afraid of hurting them and stuff like that. This guy's beating the crap out of you and you're afraid of hurting him. So the question was why? And that started questioning the mind-body connection and the spiritual connection that goes with violence and how it's robbed from people. And how do you, how as an instructor do you train people? Like I had soldiers, train soldiers to face combat. Once you get shot at, it changes your whole perspective. I mean, when you hear the rounds going by, it's not so bad. When they start bracketing you on the ground, that's when you really get scared, because now you know the guy's getting fucking close. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing in the street. Like how do you train that? How do you train police officers who have no background? When I was teaching at the academy, these young guys and gals majored in beer drinking and chasing the opposite sex before they became cops. They had no street experience. They had no real fight experience. Like 97% of the guys never been in a fight. So now you're supposed to teach them to arrest a violent offender. And keep in mind, we didn't have pepper spray. We didn't have tasers. He had a 24-inch hickory baton and a gun, which was a 38, which could barely stop anything if you think about it in terms. So, and violence was violence still. So how do you train people to deal with that? And that was, those are the moments that you start thinking about, okay, how do we do this better? And it takes team effort to do it better. Like even within your organization, if you're going to change things or do things different, you need to have a lot of people backing you up. And like with the academy, Justin stood out here in BC. I had Doug Farrells, who was a retired RCMP staff sergeant. He was the fitness guru at Depot at Regina, and he was hired on. And Doug did a 2-year study called the POPAS study, Police Officers Physical Abilities Study Test. And it became 2 years. It looked at every angle of an assault on a police officer, like the arrest, from the perpetrator's viewpoint, size, weight, skill levels, like martial arts skill, fighting skills, tactics, mental mindset, stuff like that. And it also did the same for the police officer, level of training, et cetera, et cetera. So we had 2 years of this correlated imperial data, and Doug took it and made a fitness test out of it. And I said, Doug, we've always talked about making a modern police training for self-defense, use of force. How would we take this and apply it? So the problem we had, of course, was what platform we would use. Well, I wasn't going to use Hapkido. I wasn't going to use us. Doug's background was Shotokan, I think. So, and wrestling, Western wrestling. I said, we can't. It's too much politics involved. So we said, well, let's take the Defendo model, the Army model done, and modify it. Of course, policemen don't need to know how to kill. So we modified using that statistics, and we carved it down to a police use of force model. And one of the starking things that was very common in all these things was the cops were afraid because they didn't know how to fight. They didn't understand the tactics being employed against them. In other words, they were getting emotional hijacked. So we had to create not just the physical skills, but we had to create a mind-body connection of how they were going to stay in that mindset in order to do their job. And, it took a lot of research, a lot of work, and a lot of effort. So it just wasn't using these. It was, you had to use this, and you had to develop that and try to train that to people, try to articulate it in a way. You know, I always say sweat equity. If you come to me and you're this and this, and I get you fatigued doing bag drills, all of a sudden you can't lie about who you are. You can't lie about your knowledge, your skill sets, because under the fatigue load, it's the same as the fear load. And I see your cracks. So how do I now build on those cracks? I could destroy you so you stay in flight, or how do I build you back up? And so what we do in the interditions of training is you take someone down to the raw nerve, if you will. Then you got to relayer that, because it would be the same idea of building my training on this weak foundation. And that foundation is always going to collapse under the pressure. So you got to first break the foundation, and then you have to build it up. And that's very hard for martial arts guys to accept.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's the old saying? Is your cup half empty or half full? Stuff like that. So you have to empty it.
What does a black belt mean to you as somebody who has earned several?
Sweat equity.
Sweat equity.
I mean, it means, you know, to me, they're in my old barrack box along with my Army medals. So I'm not a big ribbons kind of guy. You know, my kids, you know, they like the belts because they think that's important. I think what the belts mean to me is more that progression, and the guys that train me and the people you train with, that connection is what it means more of it. You know, it doesn't mean a plateau of knowledge or skill. It just means, you know, I spent X number of years getting there and training. And, you know, they remind me, like, you know, like the Hapkido belts for sure, like the guys who train were dead. You know, so it brings back training with those guys. Kwon-Sik Myung, he's gone. Choi Young-hee, who I trained with in Korea, he's gone. So, and they were selfless in their trying to teach me stuff. You know, even though I was a klutzy guy. I mean, none of this stuff came natural to me. I was just, you know, bullheaded and stupid. So, you know, and guys like Harold, you know, sadly, the black belt that Harold gave me for judo got stolen years ago. So I don't have that anymore. But, you know, it's the time, it's the people, it's the fun, if you will. I mean, I don't know about you, but martial arts, they're fun to me, even though I kind of rake on them sometimes. You know, I go, oh God, no more stupidity, but it's fun. I mean, like you, my wife, she goes nuts because I hear someone training. I'll go stop and listen and watch. I say, can I try it? And they look at me like I'm nuts. Like my kids do judo, and they are to bring a buddy class. And so my son, oh, you have to come. But you have to wear your uniform. I said, okay. So I put on a white belt. So my son said, no, you have to wear your black belt. So I put that on. So I'm out there trying to play with a bunch of kids doing it. So just fun. It's that. That's what it means. It should mean that. I mean, you know, it's not going to help you in a street fight. You know, nobody cares I have a black belt. Nobody cares I have this. Nobody cares I have that. It's just right. I care. And, you know, you train hard. It's cherishing. It's less, but too many guys get wrapped up in, you know, like, and sadly, the size of the belt gets smaller as the gut gets bigger, if you know what I mean. And that always disturbs me, you know, because, you know, leadership by example and stuff, you know, you're going to talk the walk, you know you're old, you do it. I mean, I know some really good guys that are in their 60s and 70s are better shape than the 30-year-olds. And so stuff like that, but it's the people, I think, more than anything, and the places like, you know, Korea, Japan, going to the Kodokan, you know, it's where you go and where you do it. You know, little islands in Indonesia doing Silat, no one's ever heard of. Thailand fighting in Muay Thai in the 70s when nobody here knew what it was, and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun. If you could do it all over again. Like everything, you know, your training, whether it's military, police, or martial, if you could do it all over again, is there anything you would have done differently? Probably shut up more and paid more attention.
Pay more attention, yeah. Or maybe the another way of asking that question is, what do you know now that you wish you knew sooner then?
Reality.
The reality of it?
I would love, knowing what I know now, it would have been like the older guys like Harold and a lot of the old timers, is, you know, to actually get their stick on it, you know, like Harold, when I got to police work, I got into a knife, got stabbed. And I went to Harold in my convalescent state. He says, we have to fix that. So that was the first time he really opened up on, this is knife and this is how it's used and this is what you do. And I said to him, why the fuck didn't you tell me this 20 years ago? He said, because you weren't ready. And I didn't think it was necessary, because this is killing. This is, he says, that's not normal. And, it's like guys come to me and they want to learn how to take out sentries and, like stuff you saw in Devil's Brigade. I don't teach you that. I don't teach civilians military or police skills. Why would I? Why do I need to teach you to kill? So I mean, if I could go back, there's that reality of it, because there's always that, a lot of the guys I train with, whether it be Koreans and some of the Japanese guys fought in the war on the Japanese side. The reality of it. I mean, how do we justify our training today? I mean, back then I was just all gaga. I mean, I just got out on the floor and trained.
Yeah.
It was the old days, 1,000 times. Imagine if I told someone to go to 1,000 roundhouse kicks and you have 10 minutes to do it, and they'd walk out the door. It's like 1,000 throws. You put on your Suranagi, go 1,000 times. They look at me like, are you fucking kidding me? So that's, those days. I mean, knowing why and how, but that only comes with age, So you can't. I mean, to young people out there, train, shut up and train. And like I get young kids, even here, come to the Brazilian clubs, and they know everything. We don't know shit, son. And they don't want to try me because I'm too old. So I make them look bad. Am I just an old guy? And if I lose, well, I'm just an old guy. So I got it both ways, right? So they want to try the younger kids. Well, they don't know shit. You're a tough guy. But they just don't want to shut up. So, be quiet, learn, and try to learn as much as you can. And then you have to learn. One of the things I would love to have been able to do as a young guy was to cipher out the bullshit. What's the raw deal? What's this? And, luckily, and I have to say that I've always been very fortunate to have instructors that were very down to earth when it came to this stuff. There was even the early Koreans, and a lot of guys laugh about Hapkido, stuff like that. It was a hard system. Nothing like I see today. And they were tough men. I mean, they fought in a war. They were tough and to the point. And it was the latter generation that got stupid. And that was the luck. I mean, that was just pure luck. I mean, today you probably get it. You find some guys like you get some good MMA guys who are going to train you properly and stuff like that. Good fighters, teach you some good skills. If you're going to be a tournament fighter, you want that type of education. If you're going to be a cop or a soldier, come see me. Go see the guys that have actually been down that block. Like I told you before, I get really upset when guys are teaching military or police and they've never been in the military or police. Where do they get that skill? They don't. And they teach, that's one of the problems we have today in those professions is the people doing the training should shut the fuck up. They're just not there. But that's just me.
What advice would you have for anyone that is looking into the martial arts, looking to start either for themselves or for, say, their children or whichever like that? What would be the best advice you think you could give them?
I think, first off, why do you want to do it? What do you want to gain from it? Not everybody wants to do the self-defense, the MMA or whatever sports side. Some guys, judo, they want to be in the Olympics, or the taekwondo, they want to be in the Olympics. So that's a goal. It's up to them. I mean, it's not, like I said earlier, it's not so much style anymore. It's who's teaching it. Who's the instructor? Is he good at it? Does he care? What's his background? A little bit. I think styles have become very convoluted in a lot of ways, especially in the non-traditional stuff. Guys are, making up stuff, left, right, and center. So, it's hard to say. I mean, my kids, I've tried them other stuff and they don't like it. So they always come back home. They like judo because the grappling, pulling, tugging, and stuff like that. they sadly don't always like training with me because, it's a little too hard, which is good and bad. But, martial arts has always been, I think, very much an individualistic pursuit. And it's hard to say, okay, I mean, they try to mass market stuff. I think as a parent, why do you want your kids into it? If it's street proofing, then you have to find somebody who can actually do that, because a lot of martial arts is going to be useless for street proofing, because guys who abduct children on the street, no kid's in a roundhouse of an adult. So, how do you train that? And a lot of bully proofing stuff is just ridiculous. It's just a money grab. So again, be, diligent, learn, know what you want to go for, redo your research, ask your kids, and then put them into it. And the same as women or adults or anybody. I mean, do you like doing it? That's where you want to be. I mean, if you go in a class and it's fun, get something out of it. Hopefully the instructor is diligent when he's teaching and stuff, but it's just not the style anymore. It's just not, who's the person doing it, I think, more so than anything. Good styles, bad styles, just, I don't know. I mean,
what would be a red flag then for someone to look out for if they're checking out, say, a club or a dojo or whichever? Like, are there any flags that you would highlight?
Anybody's got pit bulls and knives in the office, walk away. I don't. I think you have to go with open eyes. A lot of people come in and they're afraid to ask questions. They get this idea that there's supposed to be some sort of reverence to the training environment, and there should be. After you've been there a while, that is respect for the place has to earn. Like my school here, I have to earn your respect. Not because I have this or that. I have to earn your respect, and I have to do that through teaching and caring and stuff like that. And that's what you should be doing for it. If you don't see that, and you don't see smiles on the face, even though we train hard, there's smiles on the face. I mean, you have to kick their nuts, otherwise, it hurts more. So, I mean, but there are, background, this guys make up stuff, it gets crazy. I mean, I'll guys send me the resume and I read this and I thought mine was stupid, and every little 2-day course, where's the substance? If it's a karate style, is the guy certified by, like say, I don't know, Shotokan, what style you're doing or whatever. But if it's Shotokan, is he certified by whatever Shotokan organization is in charge of the stuff? It's like Hapkido. I mean, there's 27 different Hapkido organizations now, so I don't know where the hell you begin to ask, stuff like that. When I started, there was just one.
Yeah.
So, but it's, meet the guy, meet the gal. Are they good? Are they happy? Do they love teaching? And if they're, if they're wearing camouflage, for God's sakes, run away. If they got too many patches on the uniforms, for God's sakes, run away. I wear black and everybody laughs at it because why? Because it makes me slimmer. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. So, if they don't, have a sense of humor about it. My bag doesn't fit everybody by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't expect it to. So when people come in here, they're looking for sport. I'll say, well, there's 2 Brazilian clubs in town. Go try them. There's a boxing, Muay Thai. Go try that. Just Taekwondo. Guy, they're all good people. Go there. I can't help you with that. Not interested. Like going on self-defense, we're the guys. Everybody else is shite, but we're the guys. Okay? So stuff like that. So, but again, we try to empire build, I think. And when you start building empires, whether it be a small school or an organization, it's doomed for failure.
Yeah, trying to be all things to all people ain't going to work.
No.
Yeah. So this has been great. I've really enjoyed our discussion, and I hope this won't be the last time we speak. If I ever when I make my way out west again, I'm certainly going to make an effort to drop by for a session to get all twisted up and maybe hoofed in the nards or whichever. But anything that you want to add that we haven't covered before we close this up?
I don't know. I got running off at the mouth, so it's hard to say. No, I think all you guys and gals that listen to your pod, I think, the martial arts for me has been a brilliant endeavor. I mean, it's been a fitness program that has a purpose. I mean, I'm an old man, I'm still in great shape. Like the young Brazilian or other kids come in and start bragging about this. I brag because I got this gorgeous young wife and I got 4 young kids, and I started having it over 60. So I win. That keeps me in shape. Knowing this stuff has saved my life on more than a few occasions. And I'm not talking about tournament fighting. I'm talking about, so not many people can say that. Mm-hmm. So, you get in, you get out of what you put into it. And I think, I harp on sweat equity and stuff like that, and the school of hard knocks, discipline. You can't learn this stuff without all of those 3 things. So, for me, that's what it's about. And, I'm Irish Canadian, and I'm, as a soldier in this country, I'm very proud of our fighting heritage. And this system, what I try to share with the world, for lack of a better description, is what my predecessors taught me. I didn't create this stuff. I created programs to teach it better to civilians and other stuff. But the nuts and bolts of it are what real heroes created. Like from World War I, like I was taught bayonet fighting by George Clapsey. He fought at Vimy, and other guys like Harold. And we have a history of incredible fighting skills in this country and within our military. And the system that we created as an armed combat system is still to this day the best. I did a course for the U.S. Special Forces, and they said Defendo is for Special Forces, modern army combatives is for the rest of the Army. And that's the Canadians system. So we should be proud of what we know and what we can do as fighters, martial artists. And we have a system that is Canadian. This is the only Canadian martial art. And I'm not saying that because I do it, but if you look at the background and the training of it, it is truly a Canadian system we should be very proud of. And I hope that when I've gone, there'll be guys that are still going to carry it on. That's the reason I started teaching, because I saw it dying. So I'm hoping that young men and young women will take up the challenge to learn it properly, not doing the nonsensical shit that I see other guys saying is Defendo, that stuff. And if you're really keen, join the goddamn army and do it for real, and stuff like that. But, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I'm going to be around for a few more years. I got a couple kids that are going to have to take over the helm in 20 odd years. So.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask you, do you have some succession planning in place, aside from your own kids, obviously?
I think, like Harold told me years ago, Bill, if you teach this for a living, you're an idiot. So I waited till I retired 3 times, actually. So I had pensions to fall back on. But it's, there are good guys. And sadly, the good guys that train with me are European. I mean, Finland, Sweden, Hungary, and France and Spain. They're guys who follow us, that train us. They've done every course that I've ever offered. And they took it. They like to train over there. They really like to train. They take responsibility for it. I wish the Canadians would be a little more like that. And I'm sure in your group you've got good guys as well. But the average Canadian just, they slough it off. I think places like the Ukraine right now is a good wake-up call for all of us. When I joined the Canadian Army, the Russians were 8 feet tall. The Soviet soldier was this, and Spetsnaz and all. We learned really quick that they weren't 8 feet tall. They're like 5'4", and we could take them out. And we did the same thing out with the Germans and the Japanese in World War II. So, but there's a time to wake up. There are good guys. I thought, and I would like, Canadians to get involved and to actually come and train. You can't get in, we'll call it the instructor credential, without getting your ass whipped and train hard. I went an 11-week instructor course in the Army every day for 11 weeks. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done Ranger School and a whole bunch of other shit. And it didn't even compare on toughness. I've done the first week of Navy SEAL selection as a joke, because I was prodded into it when I was attached down there. Wasn't anywhere near as hard as the 11-week instructor's course here and stuff like that. So we've got something to be proud of. I'm hoping maybe you're still a young fella, take up the challenge, and other guys too. And you have to be good at basics, and you have to really like to train to get good at this system. It's not like what the other guys are putting out. There's it's a complete hard knock system that you have to master. and there's an instructor's process that you have to qualify. And, 100 years, maybe it'll be even better than it is. I mean, it's better than the American Army combatives program. I'll tell you that right now by light years. Better than the Marine Corps MCMAC program. The Canadian Army Close Combat System program is the best, period. And I got a whole bunch of Yankees will tell you that. So something to be proud of. So there you go. That's my sales pitch, for lack of better anything.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for that. And yeah, I'll make sure that I put in the description when this gets posted live, where people could find you, your website and so on, the same way I found you. And I'm sure if people have questions or are interested, they can reach out to you, kind of like what I did. I just want to close by saying, thank you for, your many years of military and police service, and also, for your efforts to ensure that those who, protect us and keep us safe, are well trained. So really, from bottom of my heart, thank you very much for what you've done in that regard. And also, again, selfishly, thank you very much for answering my email, and thank you for your time today and sharing your experiences and insights. Again, this is a passion project for me. It's it's completely selfish, this whole endeavor that I'm undertaking here, but I'm sure that there will be many that derive some good information, good insights from what you shared with us today. So really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and hopefully I didn't pontificate too much.
Thank you.